Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Ellensburg, Washington, USA, home of the Wildcats, home of the geologists, home of so much, including Hannah Shamloo and others. Hannah is getting our speaker broken in. We had a rather hurried operation to get us ready to go. Let's look at what slide they have. Could you throw the title slide on real quick, please, Hannah? Thank you. So, thank you for joining us. If you're watching this in replay, this is the title slide, Exploring the Hazards and Hidden Potential of the Abandoned Mined Waste in Washington. Our speaker today is from the Washington Geological Survey, Brennan van Alderwerelt. And Brennan is an old friend, and we are happy to have him here in town. Looks like we're operational. So let me get the wide cam going. Let me swing it around. I'll talk to you for a few minutes. We didn't get a chance to coach Brennan up on what's going on up there, but maybe he has a good sense of the operation, Hannah? Thank you much. Oh, you're 504-ing it. You're 304-ing it. Yep. Hi, everybody. Hey, thank you for joining us. It's nice to see you. And maybe some of you have not been with us recently. And you're like, why would I be with you recently? You haven't done these Friday talks for a long time. Well, we've been doing Geology 351 live streams, and we've done 4 of them so far. Have you seen them? We have a big crowd, in part because we haven't operated here in a while. And so, can I say hi to you? Where are you viewing from? And the local time is 11:53 a.m. and we'll begin our program in 7 minutes from now. Not as much delay in this auditorium compared to the 351 classroom, surprisingly. Tom's from Hillsdale, Michigan. Another Tom is from Arnhem in the Netherlands. Webb Lake, Wisconsin. North Scotty Nerd is here for everything. Nice to see you. Garrett, the Dutch night owl from the Netherlands. Hello, Garrett. Rachel, Red Deer, Alberta. Birch Bay, Washington. Olympia, Washington. Marysville, Washington. Vancouver, Washington. Orlando, Florida. That's Geology Grandma, everybody. Pat the Pilot's from Natchez, Washington. That's French. Michael is from wet Cork City, Ireland. It's 5 by 5. Somehow we're getting through that rain, Michael and family, and into your living room. La Porte, Minnesota. Red Rock, New Mexico, and so on. Let me swing you around. Have you enjoyed the vibe in the room? And I promised Jeff that I wanted to show this. It's been a while since we've had Jeff from Vindman's Bakery drop off some goodies. Like it's been a half a year or more. But he did it today. So 3 full boxes. Can you guess what's inside? It's Easter time. Hot cross buns from Vindman's Bakery. And if you're in the area, Jeff, the owner of Vindman's Bakery, reports that they're not going to be open tomorrow. If you want a last-minute run to get some Easter baked goods for your family get-together this weekend, Easter Sunday weekend, you got to come today. Okay, so this is the third of 3 boxes, and half these students don't even know what hot cross buns are. Doy. All right, thank you for joining us. We'll start in a few minutes. Hot mic. Jordan Carey working his magic. Loyal viewers of 351 recognize more and more faces. Jess and Julie, Ryan, and so on. Have you had a hot cross bun yet? Chris? How's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you. Hey man, how's it going? Hello Roger, I'm doing well. You? Good. Oh, we got surplus. Don't be shy now. Hey, young people, we got another 6 or 7 minutes before we start. There's still like a box and a half of these hot cross buns that just came in from Vinman's. They're really good, says Bree, and they're free. Help yourself. Don't want them to go to waste.
Thank you.
Jeff at Vinman's made a bunch of extra. He didn't know what to do with it, and he came to us instead.
Originally, my idea was to go for the audience. I don't have anything specific to say about them, just as much as they
I think it might be more effective and also easier if you just say, come on up after. I'll just have this whole front table full of stuff. It seems like you'll get a big
Yeah, that's actually one of the questions.
yeah. Okay, so this is your station. You know how to advance, whether it's this or this. And occasionally I'll have you, whatever's on the screen is what's being broadcast on YouTube right now. So occasionally you'll be down in the lower left. Don't let that throw you. Your slide will be up there. I'm directing the whole thing right over here. So I'll operate with whatever you do. If you walk over here and talk for a little while, it's totally fine.
All right, am I good to be wandering around and using the stick and stuff like that?
Yes.
All right, I prefer more physically engaged.
Absolutely. No, I can follow you. That's great. And in just a second, I'm going to put this mic on you, and I'm going to probably, you know what? Let's do it right now.
Yeah.
So, let me get up. You got a hot mic on you right now.
All right.
Viewers, could we get a mic check? Brennan,
Mic check.
how do I pronounce your last name?
Van Alderwerelt.
World.
Yeah,
World.
Alderwerelt.
Good. Do we have Brennan 5x5, please? Looks like we do. Okay, so they can hear you nice and loud. And
Hello, Internet.
yeah, that a boy. And Brennan, even though I'm going to amplify you a little bit with this speaker, I still want you to project and fill the room best you can. So I'll welcome everybody. I'll make a couple quick announcements about classes and things. I'll give a pretty quick introduction of you, and away we go.
How much time should I aim to talk?
Oh, it'd be nice if you were wrapping up about 10 minutes to the top of the hour, and then we do a little Q&A. Does that work for you?
Yeah.
If it's a little shorter, that's fine, but if we're rolling past 1, I guess that's a bit much.
All right. I am just deeply invested enough about this that I could take the same slides and do like 4 hours or 20 minutes, you know.
Yeah, we're shooting for a 50-minute talk, I guess, something like that.
All right. Keep it moving, keep it tight, keep it interesting.
Okay, good. This guy is wise beyond his years, man. He's spouting stuff on rocks, just effortlessly talking about the philosophy of life. I like this guy. Thank you for bringing this guy in. Fuck yeah, man, yesterday. And her too.
Yeah, I've been a bit
lazy, I guess, deciding if I really. I just want to make a lot of money this summer. It's kind of
That's fine, you can do that, but then also look deeply into those eyes and your decision's made. There's no more thinking about it. Hey, Josh. All right, let's get the speaker plugged in and we'll get rolling. Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Testing, testing, testing. Is this working? Is this speaker working?
No, he's reading off of that for you.
Is it?
No.
Finch? Thank you.
My mic is on, by the way.
Oh, hot mic. Hot mic.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome.
Maybe he's just doing
Thank you so much. It seems like it's been like 2 years since we've done this. It's been a while since we've had our Friday series, but we're back up and running, and I appreciate you joining us today. Brennan is an old friend of ours, and we'll get to him in just a second. A couple of quick announcements. Dr. Hannah Shamloo is in charge of Geology 304-504 this quarter. Have you met with everybody already? Do they know who you are? Missing a couple people? Who are you looking for? Adrian and Zach. There's Adrian/Zach. All right. Excellent. So you're checking in with Hannah for that. Since this is the first time we've done this in a while, if you're new to us, we're live streaming this on YouTube, and we need your permission to put you on camera, or even we need a signature from if you don't want to be on camera. Bree is standing in the back with a black top. Check with Bree afterwards. She's got some paperwork that you want to film, deal with that form. If you've done it already this year, no big deal. I want to keep this moving along because we have a very interesting talk scheduled today. Let me tell you what else we have planned for this spring. We have 3 more talks scheduled for this spring. They're all in May. Friday, May 9th, Ayla Pamukchu from Stanford University is coming to humble little Central Washington University out in the sticks. And she is part of the Spirit Lake Pluton. She and Mike Eddy are on a new NSF grant, and they will be here doing field work, and I'm part of that program, and so I've asked both of them to come. So Ayla will be here on May 9th, How to Build a Super Eruption. Love that title, nice and simple. And the following Friday, Dr. Michael Eddy from Purdue University will be here in person, and he's somebody that I've promoted heavily on the YouTube channel. Mike will be here on Friday, May 16th, after a full week of mapping on Spirit Lake Pluton area. Mike's talk, Hunting for Fossil Magma Reservoirs in the Geologic Record. That should be a great one as well. Then we take a Friday off, and our final spring Friday talk, must be after Memorial Day weekend, is Friday, May 30th. Sarah Offrere from British Columbia will somehow get across the border and visit us. Insights on the magmatic processes and pre-eruptive timescales of the Mount Meager volcanic complex in British Columbia. Looking forward to that one as well. So 3 more Friday talks after today. Today's speaker, Brennan van Alderwerelt, was an adjunct professor in our department a few years ago, just coming out of COVID. Brennan was with us, taught senior field, taught a bunch of our classes. And Brennan is now working for the Washington Geological Survey. Guess who else is working for the Washington Geological Survey? Jordan Carey. Jordan Carey, everybody. If you're like, where's Jordan been? Oh, yeah. So Jordan has been here, but in his office, doing work for the Washington Geological Survey just for this quarter. And we are trying to strengthen our ties between this geology department and the survey. And ideally, if we do our jobs correctly, and Jordan in particular does his linking between here and there efficiently and fully, we will get some of you employed at the Washington Geological Survey down the road. That's the hope. So we've had a good relationship, but we want to do more. So in part, that's why Brennan is here. And Brennan was emailing us every once in a while, like, hey man, we got to get some WGS people over to your campus. And so here he is, and you'll try to get some other of your fellow Washington Geological Survey employees giving talks here in the next year or two. That's the hope. Brennan has been doing some very interesting work all across the state. The title of Brennan's talk, and we'll just go right to him, Exploring the Hazards and Hidden Potential of Abandoned Mine Waste in Washington. Brennan, thank you for joining us.
All right, thank you, Nick. I'm happy to be here. As always, love coming out to Ellensburg, and like Nick said, we love to build these survey academia connections much stronger. My name is Brennan van Alderwerelt. I am employed with the survey since 2023, and my official position is Natural Resource Scientist 3. Although I usually tell people I'm a geoscientist who works on the Earth MRI project. Because I'm part of the mapping group there at WGS, and while a lot of my time does go towards mapping, I also pick up these other projects that are related to this big nationwide effort called Earth MRI. Let's see, let's go.
Yep.
Yeah, there we go, Earth MRI. And just for a little bit of curiosity on my sake, can I see who here has heard of Earth MRI? Oh, yes. Good. I love to see it. When I'm out there talking to people and I'm like, can I go on your property? If they've heard of Earth MRI, I have a 100% success rate of being supported. So I am here a little bit to toot the horn and make these projects a bit more visible, as well as celebrate what we're doing in our beautiful state with our fascinating geology. And most of what I'm going to talk to you all about today is what I've been doing and what I've seen out there. Not so much the interpretation of a lot of the data, which is forthcoming. Okay, last other thing is WGS stands for Washington Geological Survey. I'll probably say that a lot, regardless of it. Okay, so a lot of text here, but Earth MRI is a nationwide effort that's supported by the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, and it's been going on for, I think, almost 6 years now, but in Washington, we've started picking up contracts to do the state side of the work to support the USGS side of the work in this big national, federal and state collaboration effort, which is great, makes the dollar go further. And so we've had some mapping that was actually published just last year of the Cedar Canyon district. There was a huge geophysical survey flown that's called the Republic Geophysical Survey that you can find online as well. And then we have a couple of ongoing projects, and that's what my work is. And a ton of my effort goes to mapping, but today I want to talk about this one that's called Mine Waste Characterization Phase 1. Nice, simple name. But looking at our state, so that big blue L-shaped thing, that's where that geophysical flight was flown over northern Washington. And so we're trying to concentrate our projects in that area so that we can add some ground truthing and some data checks to the geophysics, which just really magnifies the value of that type of work. So the brown are the two maps, like classic bedrock mapping, and then these green squares all over the place are districts that we identified to go try to find some mine waste to go check out and sample and get super modern, full suite major minor trace element geochemistry on to help advance our understanding of the state's geology as well as the endowment of what we call critical minerals out here. Let's see, what's my next slide? Yeah, so we started with this cool little model which looks at commodities that have been reported in geologic systems across Washington, and it ranks them by value, and this helped us understand where there are hot spots where we might learn the most about these so-called critical mineral systems by targeting these specific locations that are affiliated with elements and minerals that have been deemed by the USGS, Department of Energy, and Department of Defense as critical to the base functionality of this country, our geopolitical status, our defense, security, our healthcare, our industry, the economy, and just our general way of life is supported, of course, by stuff, because things are made out of stuff, and we live in a very thing-based world, so it's important that we understand where these critical minerals are and bring a lot more of it home into domestic knowledge. That said, though, there are a lot of side benefits to doing this work that just advance our basic fundamental scientific understanding of the geology of Washington and the Pacific Northwest as a whole, because where we get mines is where we get ore, and ore is special mineralization that essentially represents a convergence of a whole bunch of different geologic factors at once. What is the rock from the Mesozoic? What is the rock from the Tertiary? What is the rock even more recently? Where are the structural weaknesses where materials can be channeled? What are the geochemical gradients that cause minerals to form in specific locations? And so there are these special spots where we can learn so much extra about the state if we just get a little bit of a stronger grasp on what that material is. But part of the challenge is when you mine away all the fancy smancy ore and take all those minerals and ship them off to a smelter, that information is lost. We can't go out and see what the cowboys saw in 1896 when they were just on their horse and was like, that looks like gold, and then suddenly they have a multi-generational empire of gold miners coming out of their family. They've dug it all up and carted it away. So one of the best things that we can look at is the waste left behind these mines and learn to understand the chemistry of what this effectively industrial waste out in the world looks like. And Washington's history with mining is a little different actually than most of the other Western states. It starts the same. We have 1850 is almost immediately when statehood gets achieved. People start going out there making mineral claims, producing a lot of placer gold, a lot of coal. And then we start to, in the 1890s, get this, I always call it the cowboy era because every picture I've seen, they have the hats and they're always kind of like just out there on horses doing whatever they feel like at the time. It's a fascinating time in history, but they kept discovering all these veins with these beautiful deposits of a lot of copper, a lot of gold, some silver, an occasional bit of platinum and all that sort of stuff. And which commodities were sought after changed, of course, with the wars and then the post-war periods as we entered the space race and people were like, what about tungsten? What about aluminum and all that sort of stuff? But where Washington really diverges from a lot of the Western mining history is that this state was at the forefront, the cutting edge of taking an environmental stance on looking at how our industries were impacting the world around us. So our state's Department of Ecology actually predates the EPA just by a handful of months, but it does predate the EPA, and so Washington has the claim to the first environmental agency in the country, which is kind of cool. It's nice to think about having proactive regulation and remediation, but something that I found that's kind of interesting is that we've actually lost some information by having these early stage remediations where the process wasn't necessarily developed as well and they might not have done as much soil sampling or chemistry or even written down what they buried under a big covered tailings pile at all. So there's some interesting holes in our state's mine history, and today there is functionally no mines pulling metals out of Washington at the time. The Buckhorn mine is permitted and considered operational, but really they're not. So there is a component of history here, and not just geologic history, but human history, legal history, and industrial history that's been really fascinating. So I've been doing a lot of archive diving in this project as I've been trying to track down these sites. And sometimes there are places I have gone fully expecting a mine with a pile of waste rock next to it, and there's just nothing. And at other times, there's a description of a small, limited site, and when I get there, it's actually much larger. And so part of what I've been doing out there is sort of making the records match reality a little bit, updating them and moving forward. So you saw on that map earlier, our Earth MRI projects are all up north, and if we take a look at geology, even if we don't know anything about nothing except colors, I think it's pretty clear that the north of our state is a bit distinct from the rest of it. A lot of these purples and blues are metamorphic rocks. A lot of these pinks are various magmatic intrusions. And I really want to draw your eyes to those magmatic intrusions because they are heavily associated with metallic mineral deposits across Washington. So last year, I visited 12 sites eventually out of the 18 I tried to reach. And look at that, they're all up there across the top. And if I just toggle between these two, every single one of them is near a little pink blob of some kind or another. There's a very strong association between especially Eocene intrusions in the state and these metallic minerals. The one outlier is up here. That's the twin sisters dunite right there, a big ultramafic blob squoozed up upon the earth. And I went to check it out to see what an olivine mine looks like. It's mostly forest, you'll see later. Okay, I don't want to linger on it too much because there's cool pictures I want to show you, but the things that I've highlighted in green, this is the criticals mineral list as of 2022. The green ones are historically reported commodities in Washington, and from just my very initial data from this mine waste, which I got back yesterday afternoon, there are also the yellow highlights that I've made here, which are other elements I've already seen popping out of some of these wastes as being concentrated in this material. And it's worth noting that there is a high level interest in this project, this dream accomplishment that maybe we'll achieve, where if a recharacterization of some of these waste piles show that they are rich in this or that element that's useful for the modern day, that potentially we could reprocess the waste to remove it from the site and use the profits from that reprocessing to complete the remediation, to help, for example, people who own a mine that hasn't been operating since the 1950s have the funds to properly remediate that instead of just like having this sword of Damocles from their previous generations hanging over them about what they're responsible for. So to be seen, that's the long-term goal. We're not quite there yet. Okay, here's some of us out in the field looking at some of this mine waste in an open pit there at a place called Silver Bell. As part of the collaboration with the feds, they came out to Washington and they trained a bunch of us on how to sample this following a standard nationalized protocol, which is great because that means that anything I do can be directly compared to what's done in New Mexico or Montana or Vermont or whatever. And also, something that's going to come up a bunch is interagency collaboration. And so in this picture of all of us here, that's me with the jacket on, but we have people from the USGS, we have people from the BLM, we have people from the Department of Ecology, and we also have people from the parent organization of WGS is the DNR, and we have people from other parts of the DNR there too. So this is a great opportunity to really elevate our science, and I'm hoping in the future to get more and more students or recent graduates involved into things like this where they can learn this practical, on-the-ground, functional, useful training and also see some really cool rocks and also help me dig holes in gravel. All right. Oh yeah, the one thing I wanted to note is that I might refer to composite samples and I might refer to grab samples. Grab samples is like, ooh, shiny rock, put it in the bag. Composite samples is we lay out a grid over these large features and scoop something like 30 holes, sieve them together, and consider that an averaging across a large mine waste feature, which is a new type of sampling that I have never done before in any of my previous work. But yeah, so that's what that means. I mostly sampled in groups of 3. I want to call out the 2 Blakes here for their tremendous amount of help. Blake Mugley on the left, who went to school at Western, and then Blake Walter, who went to school at Central Washington, were huge helps with me out in the field. Another neat thing is last year was the first time I really did my field data collection using a tablet, which I have with me today if anyone after this wants to kind of see what that looks like. And we collected these kind of gallon bags where each of those are conglomerated waste from a bunch of different mine features, each one. And I ended up sending 90 different samples into the USGS for this big suite of geochemistry. So that's a lot of data production. I'm very happy with that. I'm going to skip my MS Paint drawings. Okay. So what we're actually looking at, this is the big thing that I wanted to share with you all because I had this idea in my mind of what mine waste looks like before doing this, and that idea has changed and it's expanded, and this has become this fascinating group of materials to me where every single site has waste that looks really different and there's something to learn from it and can be challenging. And if I wasn't doing this work, there's a lot of stuff out there that I would have never recognized as being associated with mines. So I thought I'd show you some of it. A lot of it's this really complex material that's difficult to work with. It's got fine grained down to clay size materials all the way up to boulders mixed together, and so it can be tricky to kind of extricate them. And spoiler alert for the unpublished pamphlets, I've already seen some of the chemical results where the fine-grained and coarse-grained materials from the same exact waste pile actually have fractionated the chemistry. So you might have one of the metals that's only in the fines and not really present in the coarse chips, which is fascinating and has some thinking for me to do about it. But there it is. You can see it's kind of a little chemically unhappy at the surface, oxidizing to hell. you got all this magnetite and limonite and hematite going on with this guy here. This is a completely different site, but again, you can see the color is a little different from the background. And I do want to point out that some of this stuff can be chemically a little nasty, so we might choose to wear gloves when handling this directly. At the very least, don't touch the mine waste and then put your hand in your mouth. Okay. The other fascinating thing I found is every site is different and no site is what you expect. And we run into a bunch of different challenges. This is my supervisor, Russ, who that is not a dramatic pose for the camera. He is smashing apart this gravel because this is a very high altitude site where the snow and ice has kind of fused the mine waste together, so we had to really bust it up to sample it. And this one on the right is a funky one where there was a grave in the tailings from an old mine with this man who accidentally blew himself up in the 1920s. They just buried him right there. And so then that becomes an interesting question of if we wanted to reprocess or remediate this site, what do we do with the fact that there is a human being who is buried here? And then another one, just to keep going with it, is that if you've been around enough wildfires, you probably recognize this as a post-wildfire sort of ground assemblage. And that's actually what happened to the headstone made out of mining artifacts as it's fallen apart during the fire. So lots of layers of interaction, very interesting work. The other thing I want to point out is I couldn't have done any of this without the help of a ton of people around me from a bunch of different organizations. Teamwork makes the dream work, so we had foresters guiding us to some pretty obscure locations, as well as some folks I mentioned before. And then I want to give an extra shout out to the rangers who know their land better than I ever could, so sometimes a 5-minute phone call counts for like days of work. And then also what you can't quite see at the bottom, it says multiple private citizens. The people of Washington have mostly been extremely supportive of my work, and I like that. It's nice. It's good to be welcome. I have worked for the state of California before doing water, and I was never welcome anywhere, and it was kind of a bummer. So it's cool to be out here in Washington and have people supporting geology. And I have to think that at least some of that comes back to Nick and to doing things like this that help people understand that our work is significant and important and impacts all of us. All right. Okay, last thing before the pictures, I think. I also wanted to do some advertisements for some of the public resources, because in this mine hunting and wandering, almost everything that I did was using publicly available resources. There's not like a secret vault of information that I was tapping into using my DNR card, which I don't even have. I was mostly using online databases that you could go log into right now. So one, the Washington Geologic Information Portal is awesome. People from the USGS have told us that our state has the best one in the country. I'm going to take that at face value. But there's a bunch of layers, right? You can turn on the geology. Some of the less loved layers, though, are the mines and minerals, as well as the inactive and abandoned mine lands layers, which are really interesting to look at. And I suggest you check it out near where you live if you're in Washington. Yeah, I won't go into it too much. Just that this huge pile of tailings right there is now covered in a bunch of gravel. And so something I've learned is continuing to do work like checking in on these old mines and the waste associated with them. It's important that we keep doing it. Even though some of the work that I've been doing is replicating some of the previous work, it's not all the same. It's a dynamic environment out here. There's fairly intense climate. There's avalanches in this particular place. And again, we have a proactive remediation on the environmental side of our state that causes a lot of these things to be buried. And so sometimes I can only find information from the previous time someone from WGS was poking around in these old waste piles. And so I kind of cross my fingers that there will be another version of me 20 years in the future, maybe even me, but old, who does this again to continue updating the information. All right, so you can link to these in that geoportal. That's why they're here. These inactive and abandoned mine lands thing, they were mostly focused on physical hazards, but I love these reports. Some other ones that I got to through the geoportal are much older reports. I love Inventory of Washington Minerals Part 2. I go back to it all the time. But also through those links you can find things like old maps of the interiors of mines and even consulting private company reports on specific sites that are full of these nuggets of information. And then if you follow these, sometimes you'll even find materials from the miners themselves back in the day. Some of the pictures can actually be quite useful, even though it's hard to see what's going on here. If you squint enough, it's a whole amount of crushed olivine sand that was poured into the forest, and that gives me a reference point to what I've seen in 2024 versus what was seen in 1984. Other documents, the pictures are a little harder to parse, but sometimes you find these drawings from the people who actually operated these mines 100 years ago, and they can be really valuable for understanding these sites. What else? Quick one, we also have a LiDAR portal. I love LiDAR, it's great. Go online, search for Washington LiDAR portal, and you'll find it. Check it out for your state. LiDAR is some pretty high resolution elevation data, and this was a big starting point for me in finding these sites and figuring out where mine waste actually existed. Because this one, for example, on the 1961 USGS topo maps was just labeled as a single open pit, but once I went out there, well, when I looked at it, there's clearly more going on, and when I went out there, I was able to parse the site into a bunch of other features that allows us to have a higher resolution understanding of what's out there and what we might find. Boink. I don't know what this is. Yeah, oh yeah, just there's lots of tools. Another one I'll shout out is Google Earth. I love being able to just really quickly load geospatial data and tilt it in 3D, and that's become super valuable in Washington because one of our distinct challenges out here is the super steep topography. And so a lot of the protocols written by the USGS are East Coast based, where they have acres of tailings in this perfectly flat rectangular pile, and then I'm out there in the mountains looking at this like dump of waste rock that's going down a ravine at 42 degrees. So check your topography before you go out into the field, you won't regret it. And then another thing I wanted to address, that there's a social media component. And I did watch some of these videos to see the inside of mines, but I wanted to bring this up because I really want to caution people as I'm exposing you to the ability to find this information, that old mine sites are absurdly dangerous, like incredibly dangerous. I guess maybe if you were hanging out in a human-sized blender, it might be more dangerous, but mines are pretty far up there. Even something that looks safe with clean water in it might actually have hidden shafts buried beneath mud or debris. That water might be a heck of a lot nastier than you think. It's easy to get lost underground. Even being at the surface when there's just like piles of waste rock, it's really easy to knock those boulders down and have your foot crushed to oblivion from one single misstep. So these people have done it questionably just so you don't have to. But I did want to point out, for example, this nice Mindat photo I found and this collapsed tunnel from this video are the same tunnel. These are dynamic, unstable environments, right? A mine is not just a cave. It is a disequilibrium hole in the rock, and they want to collapse, they want to break down, and they want to have weird chemical reactions that can make you very unwell. I've also never seen a mine that didn't have pack rats in it, so it's a good place to get hantavirus or RSV. And also sometimes I see bear poop, so just, keep it frosty. I do want to shout out these one guys, even though they do some really ridiculous things that I would never recommend anyone to do. They do have a disclaimer on their videos, so please, if anyone's thinking about being a mine influencer, please at least write a disclaimer and tell people not to do what you do. And don't get up in the bats business. You can give them very bad diseases. And the mines in Washington are often the last refuge of these dwindling bat populations. It's really sad, actually. Okay, stay out and stay alive. I'm just going to keep it moving a little bit to show you some photos because I want to be able to talk about them. What does mine waste look like? What does it look like on the landscape? How can we find it? So sometimes when we're out there, like here in the Cascades, we might have a useful sign that tells us exactly where the mine waste is outlined, but that's the exception. This is at the Fire Lookout Tower at Hart's Pass. Very cool place, most dangerous road in America, according to YouTube. It's a high point in the Pacific Crest Trail. Oh, I shouldn't go down that rabbit hole. I just really loved being out there. It's gorgeous. Washington at its most Washington, I thought. So if we don't have a nice sign like this at the overlook, we have to parse the environment sometimes to figure out where the mine used to be, where the waste piles are, where the ruins are. We can't rely entirely on the documents. Sometimes the point will just be like the center of the quad that the mine was in. Sometimes it'll be perfectly located. So sometimes when we're out there, the mines clearly show us that there was activity in the area, that this is where people were working and this is where people were building stuff. We might see mill ruins with nice, clearly defined piles of waste. We might see an entrance, an adit that might be timber framed or held open by a culvert, which allows the bats to go in and out. That's what that's called, a culvert. And sometimes we see other sort of leftovers from the human side of the mining industry. Really cool stuff. By the way, this toilet I think is from like 1930, which I thought was really cool. And other times it can be obvious because the waste and the rock just kind of fits our casual concept of what mines and ores look like, right? So here we have this nice yellowy breccia with this is a whole vug filled with a bunch of pyrite right there, very gorgeous stuff, clearly a mineralized rock. And sometimes on the landscape, right, clearly different colored pile of junk. There's another one there that we can associate with mines in the area next to some ruins of a mill. I like this one because this mill was actually ruined, destroyed by an avalanche in the 1980s. These things have fascinating backstories. The lore gets crazy too when you start reading into like how widows would inherit prospects and trade them with each other to build these micro empires. Really neat stuff. But sometimes it gets a little trickier and can be a little harder to recognize. These two pictures and these two pictures are actually the same site. So, right, I can show you this, obvious next to the ruins. If you get up close to the rocks, you can see the minerals, but you back it off a little bit and it's like, I don't know what, a little hole, a little bit of talus. But there's an adit right there that's been buried in the waste from the very mine that produced it in some semi-ironic circle of life sort of thing. It's coming down and burying it. And then this is a open pit mine that's been filled with a bunch of the waste rock from around the area that we really had to explore to understand what it was. Let's see, here are some other examples. This is nicely mineralized waste rock. You would never know it from a picture, you would never know it from the car, you wouldn't even know it from 10 feet away. But when we got really close up on the rocks here, we started to see things like, right, there's a little copper color. This is this fabulous galena. I wish I could capture it in pictures, but it's this galena with these micro inclusions of silver. And so its luster is like galena, but more so. Like as gold is to yellow, this galena is to normal galena. It was very fabulous. And when you hold it in the sunlight, when you're there where it came from, I don't know, those of you who've been in the field probably know what I'm talking about. Rocks just look different when they're at home versus when you bring them into the office and you're like, why did I pick this up? And then some stuff was really challenging to find too. This whole bank is actually a bunch of waste from a mine here that's kind of, you know, it's got some significant trees growing up through it, but it was only through digging and exploring that I was able to expose this heavily oxidized material and recognize it for what it was. Here's a couple other challenging ones. This one was actually exposed because there was a fire. I bet I would have never found this little pile of tailings right there if there hadn't been a wildfire. So burns are good sometimes, I guess. And some other interesting exposures. So this is outcrop down here above Russ. And then this right here is the mine waste. You can barely see it. It almost looks like a soil profile because back in the day they would just like have a little hose and they would just go and dump it across the landscape. And so it's just, you know, a couple meters thick layer sitting right on top of the natural outcrop, and this one was only exposed by this like washout ravine that we're standing in there. So it can be really tricky, and I usually refer to this work as mine hunting when I'm doing it casually because there is a exploration and hunting and trying to find stuff element. All right, let's see, what else? At a single site, the appearance of this stuff can be really, really variable too. So these are all from the same exact site, where in some places it looks like big old piles of rubble and super oxidized magnetite and hematite rich sparkly rock. I actually have, at the end of this, you can come look at these rocks. I have some sparkly stuff from that pile exactly. It looks like how a cartoon would imagine mine or rock to look like. But elsewhere on the site, there was in fact nice clean pond full of frogs, and I tested it with a litmus strip and it was on the basic side of neutral. So very different from what you would expect from these oxidized, sulfidized mine waste piles interacting with water. I think there's a spring right there. I don't know how else to explain it, but you know, there's part of what I've loved about this project is it really draws from a ton of my different experiences, like my background in working in water, my different fieldwork experiences, the fact that I do have a petrology and geochemistry background, as well as like, I just kind of like exploring, which is really important. And then this is the same site as well. Again, kind of a danger thing. That's a shaft that was buried in mine waste, but it's starting to collapse now, and it's starting to create this spookiest feature that I saw again and again, which is a no escape pit. the name kind of describes it. There are these holes where the sides are oversteepened, these unnatural collapse areas, where if you were to fall in a 12-foot pit on your own, you would not get out. You couldn't climb out. It would fall back in, and you would just have to sit there like, I don't know, like Gandalf on the top of Saruman's tower, just hoping an eagle comes to scoop you away to safety. So very spooky stuff, and that's kind of another side benefit I see of doing this work, is get some of these more dangerous sites back on the map, because sometimes the Forest Service or the BLM will purposely like fill in holes and knock down ruins and collapse adits and stuff like that. There's way more unmapped, exposed, dangerous mine features across Northeast Washington than I ever expected. I've seen these hills that are just Swiss cheese with prospect pits, where if you're tromping through in August during the wild rose season, not paying attention, you could just, I'm honestly surprised it doesn't happen with the elk hunters more often. So elk hunters, watch out. All right, let's see. Another interesting thing is the mine waste is heterogeneous, and it is subjected to just the actions of the climate. So you can have places where natural surface processes like separate these materials into different fractions, even if originally they were mixed. I'm not sure that's what happened here, but I do like this example for showing the top of the, oh yeah, this is not a laser pointer. The top of the mine waste pile is a bunch of chunky waste rock here, but if you follow it down this ravine until you reach the very toe of it, it's this incredibly fine-grained clay-like tailings material, and they separate each other out. And so the guy who was living near here, I'm not sure, recognized exactly what he was living next to. Which is something I found a ton, is people like living on tailings piles, which is like what comes out of the bottom of a mill and is often kind of chemically a little nasty. So many times I saw hunters' camps or like four-wheeler people's like camps where they'd be like, oh, look at this nice open field, let's camp here, not having any sort of awareness of what they were setting up on. And at least 3 different instances, I saw someone who was building a cabin or some other sort of residence on their nice flat open field. And when I talked to those people, they did not know what they were building on. So again, another reason to keep doing this work is to keep people informed. This might not look like much to someone who has never heard of the concept of tailings. You know, you can dig into it. It's this ultra fine grain. This one is really, really lead rich, I know, for example, type material. But you can see there's a difference in the vegetation. And so that's something to keep an eye out for, especially if you're in the Northeast and you're like wandering through the forest and suddenly you come across this incredibly flat meadow, mostly filled with grasses. The ecologists tell me that these are mostly invasive grasses too, and that's like a great way to identify that you've crossed it to something unnatural, essentially, again, industrial waste. It's just been kind of partially re-brought into the landscape. So that's a mill tailings pile. There's a hunter's camp right there. This is also a mill tailings pile where someone was considering, well, actually, I'm not going to tell his story. Just watch out there. Here's another one out near the town of Orient, where it looks like a big meadow. It looks like a part of the environment, but if you dig down beneath the roots, it very quickly shows that it is a different material, and that's the waste from an old mill at a place called First Thought. Yeah, there's Heather. Here's another one, the one on the west side that I went to where it was really, really rainy. I was super impressed by this one. The forest was just gobbling it back up. So in some instances, nature does kind of do the remediation on its own, which raises some questions of, do we even consider remediating a place that's already being reclaimed naturally? So that's what it looked like on the surface, just kind of mossy and tree-y, but if you dig down into this area, it's a bunch of crushed up olivine sand and peridotite and chromite and whatnot. Cool stuff. So what we're doing with this information and these sites that I've sampled is they've been sent in for chemistry. It's just come back, so I don't have a bunch of charts for you, or maybe I do. But we're creating these short little pamphlets, which if we can really get our stuff together, will only be a couple of pages long, that I'm trying to write for not a truly general audience, but like this somewhat informed and definitely interested general audience. Someone who at least knows what a rock is, who can look through these, sort of understand the site, see a little bit of its history, and then this is just stand-in data at the time, but we're going to present a lot of the elements relative to the average crustal abundance. We do not make any assessments of value or like, should you invest your life savings into the mineral rights here? That's not what this is. That's deeper decision making that you will have to make on your own if that's what you're interested in. We just report the data. So that's what we're working on now. And it's going to come with these big online databases, which I'm pretty excited about. I love the idea of public data. It really gets me going. So this one will be huge. And then I'm hoping to get also, along with this, get published this description, generalized descriptions of what these different features are to help people recognize them when they encounter them on their property. Like I said, yeah, I was literally putting this together yesterday evening, but we're already getting some of this data back and we need to process it and think about it, but there's already some interesting things popping out at us. There's a lot more gold telluride deposits than have previously been reported. I keep seeing tellurium popping up in some of these sites, which is not unexpected. It's just advancement from how they've been described historically. A bunch of sites have given us large, I just keep slamming the button, large spikes in manganese, and vanadium shows up every once in a while, and I have some reading to do because I do not have even an initial explanation for why that is, but it's fascinating. And I'm really looking forward to digging more into this data. All right, so summarizing some of my lessons. 1, LiDAR rules. Anything you do out there, any sort of scientific work, any sort of earth science work, I strongly suggest you go and download the LiDAR as like step 2 after deciding where you're going to go. It can go a long way and can be really, really helpful even if you don't think it is at first. My second lesson is to talk to people. And I put on the phone there because last spring I had this like anxiety turnover in my brain where I just never wanted to send an email again in my life. And so even though I don't like calling people on the phone, I started doing it, and it was like the most fruitful thing I'd done in ages. I just call someone on the phone and talk to them for 10 minutes and get days worth of information just dumped straight into my ear. So it might sound obvious to some of you from the landline era, but I encourage everybody from the up-and-coming generations to try to make yourself less anxious about the phone. It only took me about a week to get over my weird hang-ups, and it produced a great amount of fruit, and I found so many people willing to help me. Digi-legwork, you can find a lot online, kind of said that. Another thing is every agency works differently, so you want to know like who owns the land and all that sort of thing, and it's worth your time to call a ranger and say, how does your district deal with this or that sort of thing, because it can change pretty rapidly in areas close to each other. And then kind of summarizing mine waste in Washington, this is feedback that I give to the USGS as we continue to develop this project, because what I've done last year is just sort of a phase 1, not quite a pilot project, but we are creating like new protocol and new effort in trying to make this something that becomes a more widespread effort. And so some of the observations that I'm kicking back to the federal level is that like the history of remediation in one state is going to make the mine waste in Washington look very different from Nevada, very, very different from Florida, and the fact that all our mines are, well, pretty much all of them closed in the 70s, and then, well, most of them closed in the 70s, nearly all of them closed in the 90s, where there's not a lot of action going on right now. And this is very different than, say, New Mexico or Nevada, where there's been hundreds of years of continuous mining where the universities and the surveys and all that stuff, they know each other and there's deep institutional knowledge. So we actually here in the state have some catching up to do, which falls on my shoulders for now, and possibly some of you as you enter the workforce. We live in a really dynamic environment. I don't think I need to emphasize that too much, but the steep, rugged terrain, the different climates here, and even the speed of development in Washington means these things are changing so fast. And yeah, watch out for land ownership. Just because everything in 100 miles in every direction is U.S. Forest Service doesn't mean the tailings pile that you're looking in front of you isn't privately owned by a super tiny parcel that's right around it. I ran into that so often where only the mine waste was owned privately even though I was on public land. But again, talk to people on the phone, call them at their place of work, say, can I go on your mine waste? My what? And, you know, start a good conversation. Let's see, and so moving forward, we're currently writing to hopefully get funding extended to keep doing this. I want to drop that in your ears because I'm hoping that we get funded to hire some field assistants, and I'm hoping we can pull the field assistants from some undergraduates at the end of their tenure or recent graduates to bring them out into the field. There's a lot of holes to be dug with shovels I need help with, but there's a lot to learn as well while you're sweating and digging and labeling sample bags and all that stuff. I'm working on getting more and more industry and private places interested in having this happen. I think as we get them published and people see that we're not the big scary government, we're here to do science, that this will continue to kind of gain some momentum and people will be like, I don't know, I have a dream of people calling me and be like, will you please come sample my mine waste? I got this huge pile on the back lot. And one thing I'd really like to do in the future is start to work with the tribal lands as well and work with the governments there. There are some mine wastes that are just physical manifestations of horrible historic injustices that I think we can step forward on, but it's always tricky working across what is effectively international boundaries. So that's far future, and I'm always fishing for people to talk to about these things and how to make them happen. Yeah, and then our state benefits from these greatly, not just knowing about waste, but also knowing about what minerals are out there, what the chemistry is, where these sites are, and heck, even like plotting these things can sometimes define geologic features. I have this one series in the Huckleberry Mountains where I visited like 5 or 6 sites, I think it was, and it just like plots out where this vein used to be just from going through them, which is really neat. And we can get that public because part of the funding for this through EarthMRI means any data we produce has to be made public, which I'm all for. As I said, I love public data, so I'm down for it. It's going to be online. And yeah, leaving it to will I am. It's only waste if we waste it, so let's get out there and find the beautiful things. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I would down to answer some questions, and then after that we can, I have some rocks actually from waste piles up here if you want to look at them. All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Brennan. We're going to do some live Q&A, and Brennan is going to try to remember to repeat your question so that the folks watching at home can hear the question.
Got it.
We got a few questions here today. Plenty of time.
So how long does it take for you to prep to go to a mine site?
The question was, how long does it take to prep to go to these sites? It's very variable. There are ones where I have sat down for like 10 minutes and gone to Mindat and followed the links at the bottom and gotten everything that I need to understand a site. There are other ones where I spent months talking to people to try to figure out if these places even existed and how to get to them. But it's the last part that's usually the hardest, the how to get there. Don't trust every roadmap that you see. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, have you worked in Liberty area or do you plan to?
The question is, have I worked in the Liberty area, which I thought someone might ask. A lot of Liberty interest out here. I haven't yet. And to be honest, there aren't any significant accumulations of mine waste in the Liberty area that are on my radar yet. But I do think it's worth noting that there are, depending on how you count them, hundreds to thousands of these old mine sites in Washington. And so something I might put out there is if you have a site in mind that you know about, you can reach out to me. If you don't even remember my name or anything, you could just send something to the front desk. I got some old mine waste over here, and it will find its way to me eventually. So I would be interested in learning more about the Liberty area and what's out there, but I haven't looked into it too much. Yeah.
You mentioned having a good success rate with landowners who are familiar with EarthMRI or other programs related to your work. What methods do you use for landowners that might not be as willing or understanding of the process?
Right, so the question is, how do I work with landowners who might not be accepting of having the state come and sample on their land? And it's a challenge. Every person is different. You gotta listen. Usually if someone is hesitant to let you onto their land or to work with you, they usually have a reason. It might just be a feeling, it might be a story. Let's see, is this gonna be too honest? People are happy to know that I'm not with the Department of Ecology, which is the regulatory body in the state. So when they hear I'm with the survey, that actually gets a lot of support. And when they hear that I'm doing science, that gets a lot of support. It's funny, I don't know, people are very accepting in Washington. I've even had people telling me about how they don't trust the government and they don't want any research on their land as they're taking me onto their property and showing me exactly what I want to go see. So I think there's always a way. The real duds that I have are people who just won't answer the phone. And I don't know what you do about that. Keep trying, I guess. But it's tricky, yeah, and it's a skill that we all have to learn if we do work on public lands, and there's a lot in Washington, and private lands. Yeah?
You mentioned that you tried to get to 18 sites, but only made it to 12. What happened with those other 6?
Right, most of the 6 sites that I ended up not sampling, the most common reason I couldn't was that they'd already been remediated. So they accumulated all the waste into a big pile. They might cover it in a geotextile, essentially a fancy tarp, and then they'll put gravel on top of that and then soil on top of that. And it was a surprise to me to learn that even in big EPA-led Superfund projects, that nobody archives the material that gets buried. Maybe I was being overly optimistic, but I expected them to like have a Ziploc bag's worth of whatever toxic waste got buried by this $7 million project or something like that, but that information is not out there. So that was the biggest thing that prevented me from being able to sample everywhere I wanted. And remediation is tricky. I brought it up a bunch because there's several different groups that'll do it. There'll be the EPA, there's the ECY, sometimes Ecology, sometimes the BLM, Bureau of Land Management will do some remediation, and sometimes it's done by private companies. And the fact that those remedial acts have happened don't go to some like master national database that's really easy to query. So the one other public thing that I considered making a slide but didn't for some reason is there's something called the Ecology's Cleanup Site Identification Search website, CSID. If you search for CSID space ECY space WA, you'll get to this, and it's mostly like leaking gas tanks and stuff like that, but mines are included in that list as well. But the other thing that prevented me from sampling some sites is sometimes I'd go there and there was just nothing. There was just gone. One of the sites that I did not manage to sample, I think it was because there was a wildfire that caused a mass wasting event and all the waste just got buried in a landslide essentially. And then there was another one I found where all the slash, like the trees cut down post-fire, they just put it on top of the mine waste and like mixed it in, and so I didn't feel like I could sample it and like confidently say like, yes, I was actually hitting mine waste versus just timber soil. Yeah, that covers almost all of them. All right, yeah?
How rare do you find it that the land kind of naturally remediates itself?
Yeah, it's a good question. How often do I find that the land naturally remediates itself? Less often than not. It's kind of what I was getting at with those open meadows, is they look like a natural reclamation, but it's a lot of cheatgrass, a lot of invasive species that occupy these spaces, and I don't think I would necessarily call that remediated. They also continue to have sort of a different hazard of being washed away or perhaps causing mass wasting because they are not the natural land surface, right? You can have this very weak clay-like tailings material that's only held by a little earthwork that somebody built in 1986 that's just a couple meters thick and might not have even had an engineer involved in its construction. So that represents like a geomorphic surficial hazard that I would not consider remediation. It was really, geez, how do I answer that site? I don't know, I have a lot of feelings about this because also seeing a bunch of those remediation piles, they often do not grow vegetation on them, so they look like pretty nasty scars because they're covered in that textile and that gravel and nothing grows on them, which can look worse than ones where no one's ever touched it, and then you're getting these fir trees that are just starting to grow up because those guys are very tolerant of certain soil types. It's tricky. Yeah?
Does most of the remediation for these types of mines just involve burial? I'm from western Pennsylvania, so there's a lot of acid mine drainage and a lot of
Right.
remediation, but it says burial.
So the question was about what do these remediations look like? Is there a lot of burial, and is there any acid mine drainage? So I'll start with that last one. I was actually expecting to see a lot of acid mine drainage out there. There's a lot of sulfides and oxides and iron ores that, to my geochemist brain, should be producing acid mine drainage, but I saw almost none of it, which is very curious to me and something I haven't quite answered satisfactorily towards myself. Like even at unremediated sites, you wouldn't see that orange slime coming out of it. Although I did see a pH of 2 at one point, so it is out there. And a lot of the remediation is actually backfilling the old shafts and adits and whatnot with a bunch of the waste, but most of it is accumulation and shallow burial and then destruction of the roads to reach the site. Because a lot of these are very, very remote and some of them predate national forests, so they'll just be like way out in the middle of federal forest land and they'll just destroy the road to get there and then kind of let things take their course. Chris.
Brennan, you mentioned the vegetation coming in. I was wondering, is there any aspect to this where you're actually sampling that, or any plants that concentrate and find interesting elements that could tell you something about what's down deeper under the subsurface other than just digging pits?
I have thought about that too. The question was, does the vegetation ever give hints at what might be buried beneath the surface? And I'm sure it does, but I did not have an ecologist on my adventuring party this last year. I do have it kind of in the side of my brain. It would be great to diversify the expertise of people that go out with me. And I've been talking with some of our wildland ecologists and learning so much more because I'm not a plant person. I can somewhat reliably tell a cedar from a spruce from a pine, if you give me some time. Other than that, I just don't know enough about plants to notice a lot of these, but there are patterns in my notes for sure about certain plants showing up on certain mine wastes, and I do want to have that conversation with some more biota people. It's good. I feel like it's something I skipped over a little bit, honestly, in my schooling, is learning a lot more about the plants that are associated with the geology. I remember it from when I was a field camp student. There was one sandstone that you could just entirely map by where the junipers were. But I got in trouble for doing it, so I kind of suppressed that in my mind.
One more? Scene? You guys still got your question?
Just the protective gear. You mentioned wearing gloves. Is there any other precautions that you take out in the field dealing with that waste?
Well, I always bring a hard hat with me. If there's ever rocks above my head, I want to have a hard hat. Oh, the question was, what other protective measures might I take beyond gloves? I did not end up wearing masks very much. I thought I might, but I really didn't see much in the way of dust, surprisingly. The only times that are coming to mind where I wore masks was going into old buildings full of rodent and owl turds, which was pretty nasty. What else? Steel-toed boots are valuable, especially around waste piles and that stuff rolling downhill. Like I said, one misstep can crush your foot forever. But really the most dangerous part about accessing these sites is driving there. Just country roads are wild in general, and then you get on the forest road, which can get a little wacky. We had some pretty close run-ins with cows. There was this one where we accidentally herded a bunch of calves down this road with the truck, and we couldn't get them to not think that we were herding them, and we had to stop and be like, "Oh, get out of here." I worry about that. I don't want to mess with anyone's beefs. Also, cows, don't mess with them. They're dangerous animals. But some of the roads are deteriorating, and that's actually something that's been on my mind, is some of these sites feel like I wouldn't be able to even reach them if I was doing this 5 years in the future, just as so much water is shooting down the hills and mass wasting and just annihilation. Oh yeah, one of the sites I didn't get to was because there was a huge landslide that destroyed the road, and so I would have had to hike 12 miles in, collect all the samples, and then 12 miles out, and then I decided there was better uses of my time.
Hey, let's thank Brennan one more time. So students, I know it's really nice out there weather-wise, but our speaker today is going to be here at 1:30, half an hour from now. He's going to be in room 114, meeting with as many students as possible, talking about opportunities for you this summer and beyond, and everything more you'd want to know about this field. And there's also these wonderful hard rock samples that Brennan lugged in here from his car, plus he got a ticket parking right out here. Brennan, I don't know if that's breaking news to you or not. So anyway, thank you for coming. We'll see you in a couple of weeks for Isla Pamukchu from Stanford. Thanks, everybody. Pass the hat.
All right.
Thank you. Great job.
On mics?
Yep. And we'll have a crowd.
How was the internet? Any interesting questions on that?
There were, but I wanted to default to these guys. Okay, everybody. Oh, hang on. Can I slip behind you, please? All right, we still have more than 300 of you here. Let me do a little color commentary. I had to turn the speaker off in the room. Check this out. We've got a scene here. I mean, that's Jordan Carey. That's not the scene I'm talking about. I'm talking about this. Hello.
Hey, YouTube. Hannah Shamloo here, coming at you live.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, good energy, people sticking around. You can't argue with this part of the whole thing, you know, when we've got undergraduate students, graduate students, all galvanized by Brennan from the Washington Geological Survey. Plenty of good stuff here. So thank you for tuning in tonight, this afternoon, this morning, whatever day it is. I don't know, man. I've been running a little wild lately. But take the weekend off. Sit under an oak tree with a yellow pen, start to get ready for next week. And yes, if you love this stuff and you kind of forgot or didn't know that the live streams from the Geology 351 classroom are happening, they've been happening. Every Tuesday and every Thursday at noon Pacific, our little group of 25 students has really clicked this past week. And we were out hiking yesterday above the Columbia River. Beautiful, beautiful evening. And then Drumheller Channels the week before. No, I didn't film. I just, especially early in the quarter here, I've been wanting to meet, hand gestures, been wanting to really connect with our students, and we're there. So I think I maybe will start filming out in the field now that I kind of have the heavy lifting going on. Andrew Sadowski here. We got to get him on camera. So it's working, and you are welcome to get caught up on the 4 replays as well as the interview with Jennifer Kasbaum that happened yesterday. So I don't know if you're interested in the Ellensburg formation, but we got a lot of good stuff going on. Thanks, everybody. I love you.